When one brings up the name James Patterson, there's usually a mix of emotions. Some will claim that the person is the best author of the younger generation. Some will say the man was peaked in the early 2000s, the mid-2000s even, with some hit books such as Witch and Wizard, Maximum Ride, which is now a manga, and I believe the manga's still going. Several graphic novels, and even one, which of course got its own TV show, The Zoo, or just Zoo. Now, I could bring up that can of worms in a nutshell, especially in its later fucking seasons, and the absolute jumping the shark explanation for the whole damn thing, but I'd rather not. That's a headache I'd rather not cover, and I'm not going to cover in this video. No, the one we're going to talk about is The Witch and the Wizard. And I'm going to go ahead and have a confession. I did read this, and I did enjoy it at a young age when I was in junior high and high school. I enjoyed it because as a D&D player and even a amateur dungeon master, even for text roleplay sessions that I would game master over, the idea and the setup was kind of a cool setting for, like, say, resistance fighters, or even a sort of finding a planet that's in this state, things like that. But before I even continue with that, I will admit that this book has a very big, glaring problem that, while yes, a younger reader will not understand, but will enjoy it as a magical adventure fantasy story of basically the big bad against some rebel forces, much like Star Wars or any sort of basic good guy against bad guy story, there is one glaring issue. And I'm going to let Austin talk. I'm going to let Austin say what the world is, and it's and the world that James Patterson set up for Witch and Wizard.
No fucking sense.
Yeah, the world makes no goddamn sense. When bringing up a world, or even when creating a story, for that matter, the world has to make sense. The world that you create must make sense and allow one of any age to be able to dive into it, be immersed into it. Fallout, for all its intents and purposes in the later entries, especially from Fallout 4 to 76, at least they allowed, at least you could be immersed into it, especially with survival mode. Even with Fallout 76, as much as people will have an issue with the game, they can universally agree that the world it's set up of West Virginia is one you can be immersed in.
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
Now, the other thing is that, cannot fucking believe I'm saying this, the other thing about this story that absolutely makes no goddamn sense is that it's supposedly a dystopian world. Even though it's set in the modern era and supposedly takes place in the United States.
Excuse me, what?
Along with that, just... Okay, let me try and explain this as best as humanly possible before I lose my own goddamn mind. I go and I get thrown into a fucking rant, because I don't want my blood pressure to shoot up. But this rant is going to happen either way. What is the summary of this story series? The novels follow a 15-year-old Wisty and his 18-year-old brother, a 15-year-old Wisty and her 18-year-old brother Wit. In a dystopian future where people can be brought up on charges of witchcraft, the teens and their parents are charged witchcraft despite their claims that magic does not exist.
I couldn't make this shit up. I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. I'm sad that I lack the talent to make this shit up.
That's the summary of this entire goddamn story. And even moving on from that, the whole thing of saying it's a dystopian world makes no fucking sense. Because in the first damn book, we see that this supposed freaking New World Order party takes over in Congress and even is elected in the United States House of Representatives, the Senate, and even the fucking presidential house, the executive branch.
Bullshit! Bullshit!
Even though that makes no goddamn sense. Even the United fucking Nations, for all its worth, would not allow such a power to come to being. I don't care if you're going to bring up the whole theory of, oh, it was magic that allowed this. Not everyone would be along with this. Not everyone would go along with this New World Order. And the fact that in the story itself, the supposed rebel fighters are all teenagers or children is absolutely fucking stupid. You're telling me that no adults, especially in the US goddamn A, would resist this type of thing? Would resist this regime?
Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms. Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand?
Newsflash. There are more Holocaust survivors in the US. There are more genocide survivors in the US than anywhere else in the world. There's a fucking reason for that. Because the US has a constitution and a Declaration of Independence that protects everyone's rights and has checks and balances that keep this sort of thing in check.
Of course!
The one fucking amendment I know would definitely go into play as soon as someone starts seeing Fed boys or these frickin' New World Order brown shirts start coming in and rounding up people would be this particular one, which of course I have marked in my pocket Constitution and Declaration of Independence. The certain amendment in question states, and I quote, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The Second Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, which comes from the Constitution. And you want to know something? The first time that a government actually tried doing this kind of crap, tried controlling the government, tried pushing for this sort of shit, was after World War II in Athens, Tennessee, where a well-armed group immediately armed up and assaulted the jailhouse for which this corrupt bunch of motherfuckers were, and even dynamited police cars. Look up the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, if you want to see what happens when people are pushed around. Look what happens when people who fought tyranny do not want tyranny running their county or even their fucking country. Better yet, let's take another good example of what happens when something corrupt happens within the system to try and put something in that people do not agree with. January 6th. The protest and even the storming of the Capitol fucking building. While not as bloody or as gun-fueled as Battle of Athens, Tennessee, it still shows that people don't like being pushed around. And James Patterson, I think he forgot that.
Fucking wrong!
And even then, before any of you try and say, oh, but the government would have done... No, motherfuckers. The Japanese had a saying about us during World War II and why it would be a physical impossibility to invade mainland US. Behind every blade of grass is an American with a gun. These people were if these New World thugs were going around trying to round up people, they would have been gunned down. There'd be firefights, sporadic firefights. Gangs who were originally at war, like the Bloods and Crips, would have immediately teamed up and would have started fighting on these people. Whole police departments would have started mutinies. Whole National Guard units. The entire fucking military complex within the U.S. would have immediately started fracturing and immediately starting turning on each other. Because, guess what? The United States military, as much as people want to try and say they're the thugs of the establishment, those are the ones who have probably been indoctrinated. The bulk of the U.S. military would not follow those orders. They would immediately say that those orders are unlawful and immediately start pointing their guns at the establishment. Already, I've taken apart why this would not work within the U.S. alone, and why the U.S. would immediately devolve into a basically Red Dawn scenario where there are the free states, and then there are the states that are occupied by enemy forces. But I hear you asking, what about the world? Germany would immediately be pointing their guns at us. France would immediately be pointing their guns at us. Britain would immediately be pointing their guns at us. The entire world that is not a totalitarian, authoritarian state that did not support this sort of thing and did not support this change in leadership would immediately be pointing their guns at us. Because as soon as this authoritarian government is seen and announced coming to power, the world would immediately be enacting embargoes, blockades, and even plans for liberation of the states. And while the New World Order may claim that this is an invasion by foreign forces, the rest of the world will immediately be saying this is a liberation of the United States, the beacon of democracy and freedom from a totalitarian dictatorship that is festered and burrowed into them. Canada would immediately be closing off borders and massing forces on them borders. Mexico and South America would immediately be moving forces from their borders to our border in Texas. Hell, Texas would probably immediately secede from the Union and declare independence as soon as this crap was announced. The South would immediately secede from the Union as soon as this crap was announced. The majority of the southern U.S. from the pass of the Mason-Dixie line would immediately secede from the Union as soon as this crap is announced. And I say this as someone who lives in Tennessee. Again, James Patterson's Witch and Wizard makes no fucking sense to someone who is older and actually understands how the world works. Now, is that to say it's a bad book series? No, not really.
What the fuck?
Okay, before any of you start trying to lynch mob me, hear me out. James Patterson is a young adult and young child author. Most of his books, if not all his books, are pointed towards the young adult audience and demographic. So, yes, it makes sense that to an older reader, everything doesn't make a sense. But like I said before, when I was a younger child and a younger reader within junior high and high school, I enjoyed the books and saw a lot of cool ideas that I could use for my D&D campaigns or even my homebrew campaigns, be they text-based or otherwise. So yes, Witch and the Wizard makes no sense whatsoever in terms of for the older audience. For the younger audiences, it's a good action-adventure story. But even then, if you want a better action-adventure story and one that actually makes a little bit of sense, stick with Star Wars, or even Star Wars Rebels, or any of the Star Wars entries. Those stories are a lot better and actually engage the mind and challenge you to understand the world. Witch and the Wizard, not so fucking much. And I'll tell you now, to the fanfiction authors who I know are watching this, I challenge you to take this world that James Patterson tried making and fix it. Make it better. Allow it to make sense. Because I'll tell you right now, there were a lot of cool ideas presented in this book, the book series as a whole. There were a lot of cool ideas that actually did make a little bit of sense. But as a whole, this book series from 2009 needs to definitely be fanfictioned up, needs to be militaried up, needs to have a larger worldview installed into it and to be more realistic. Or hell, to my international viewers and my viewers as a whole, let me know in the comment section down below what you think of Witch and Wizard and why it would not work as a realistic story. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of Witch and Wizard and why you think it would not work. What would your state do? What would your militaries do? How would people react to a new world order gaining control and seizing control of the seats of power and attempting to create witch hunts and say that magic is real? And even if magic is proven real, again, you get what I'm saying. How do you think the world would react to the new world order? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I've been AirsoftAL, and James Patterson, you can make decent stories for young adults, but dear God and Christicles as a whole, you legitimately need to be put in need to be checked, my dude. You just, yeah. Either way, though, as always, I've been AirsoftAL, and if you want to come join me and discuss Witch and Wizard, there's a link to the Discord down below. And if you want to help support the channel and even help acquire some books to review, I have an Amazon account now. And if you want to help donate some Amazon gift cards towards me, contact me via my Discord down below, and, let's talk. Either way, though, thank you all so very much for watching. As always, I've been AirsoftAL, and, yeah, that's about it. Till next time, ladies and gentlemen.